Awesome. All right. So welcome to Full Court Press. Welcome back. You've got myself, Nate, and Bruno as our hosts for today. And joining us is a very special guest today, a barrister whose career bridges courtroom grit with social impact, from handling landmark sports law cases to championing diversity in the legal profession. She brings intellect, passion, and purpose to every role she takes on. Whether she's standing up for human rights or helping shape the future of the sport, her work speaks volumes. So let's dive into the minds of one of the most dynamic legal voices in our country. Welcome, Gayann Walker.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I think I might cry. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I think I don't often stop to think about the impact of the work that I do, because it's normally quite fast-paced, especially in the world of sport. If you think about disciplinary actions, they have to be determined, before the next game is played, or, a league getting advice has to be timely. I don't really stop to think about that. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, of course.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. As you can tell, we are very privileged to have you here. But let's get to know you a little bit more before we dive into the nitty-gritty side of things.
Sure.
So originally you're from the USA, moved to Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about that move for yourself?
Yeah, so that was back in 2010. This is a bit personal, but my husband and I eloped in Australia. We were on holiday.
That explains it. Okay.
And we really enjoyed our trip, and we were like, I wonder if we could ever live there, actually. And then my husband accepted a transfer through his company, and we moved. We didn't really have plans for how long we would be here or if we would go back. We just were kind of like, let's give this a go. So we moved from the Tampa Bay area to in Florida.
Yep.
For people who don't know, that's in the south. That's in the southeast of the United States. It's on the west coast. And we moved to Perth, which was very similar, like climate-wise.
Yeah.
And we just really enjoyed our time here, and we've stayed. So thankfully, we've been able to, we got our permanent residency and now citizenship. So
congrats.
it's kind of stuck with me now.
That's amazing.
That's
That's a
awesome.
whole.
So good.
Wait, but what brought you from Perth to Melbourne? Because that is not similar climate-wise.
No, but when we were living in Perth, we had a holiday here in Victoria. We went to Melbourne. We went out to some of the other regional areas, and I always felt that Melbourne was very similar to Boston, which is where I grew up, and it just has a similar university. There's many universities, lots of art and culture, theater, great food.
Yes, that's so true.
I always felt very at home in Melbourne. So the transition for me from Perth to Melbourne was quite easy.
Yeah. Okay.
For my husband, maybe not so much. It's a bit cold for him. But
Especially on days like this, like under 10 degrees. It's
Well, coming from Canada to here, transition was fairly easy, but I still don't like the cold. Okay. So.
Yeah, no, you are like the people who swam in the middle of winter when I was living in Florida.
Exactly. Exactly. I would do that, but my family's Italian, so it just means I complain about the heat and hate the cold.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's how that goes. Okay.
It's a diva.
Exactly. You nailed me.
So let's dive into the side of sport-wise. So what sort of got you into the field of sports law? Do you have a sport background? Do you have maybe your family has a history in sport? What's the go there?
No, I was sporty growing up. I played field hockey, I played ice hockey, I played tennis. Played tennis for a little bit in university before that got just a bit too much for me. But after university, I probably got more into like long distance running and triathlon. So I've done all sorts of sporty things, biking, taught myself to swim at the age of 30. So
Oh, really?
that,
awesome.
Yeah, went from not swimming at all to half Ironman. Like that was
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's a
I
feat.
learned just how to swim the past couple months as well. So I'm right there with you.
Really?
yeah.
Could not do a half Ironman.
Something I
That's
didn't even know
insane.
about my co-host.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know.
There you go.
Come on.
So the best race I ever did, I'll tell this story because it's interesting. It's called the Escape from Alcatraz Triathlon,
Sick. Cool. That's unreal.
So cool.
which was amazing. So they load you up on a boat and take you out into the middle of San Francisco Bay, and you jump off the boat and swim back to shore.
Wow.
So
Oh, that was crazy.
That was cool.
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was an amazing experience. Shark infested water, but you're swimming with like
Oh, never mind.
like
I'm out.
dozens and dozens of people. But the coach that I had at the time said just really enjoy it. So at one point, after I stopped getting like elbowed in the face, as you can do, like when you're doing triathlon swim, I flipped over onto my back, and then like you're laying in the water, and then there's Alcatraz, like the island, the prison, like right in front of you.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
So is,
What an
is it true
experience.
that prisoners might have been able to survive? Is that
well,
sort of-
I did it. So
Yeah, there you go.
There
like,
you go. Yeah. And only learned how to swim at 30. So
Yeah,
hey,
right,
there you go.
right.
impressive. That's
Prisoners with a swimming background, they would have been
Yeah.
out of there.
They would have been so
out of
quick.
there. Yeah. You would have been doomed.
I would have. I was stuck there.
Yeah.
I would be no good.
Life.
Best mates with the guards.
That's it. That's it. That's your superpower.
In terms of sports law, I actually never practiced sports law in the U.S. I did more personal injury litigation. And then when my legal jobs in Australia have also been litigation based. So it wasn't until I went to the bar here in Victoria that I started doing and focusing on sports law. And at the time, so that was back in 2019, and at the time I was really interested in doing football tribunal work, so AFL tribunal. I
Yeah.
was fascinated, obsessed really with footy when we moved here. And I just randomly emailed Jeff Gleason. I don't know if you know his name. Jeff, he's a KC.
Yeah.
He is the chair of the AFL tribunal. He wasn't at the time. He is now.
He is now,
Obviously,
right? Yeah.
He's an amazing advocate, and I've had the privilege of being his junior in another matter. But I said, Jeff, I'm new at the bar. I'm really interested in football and tribunal work, and I know that you. I actually found his name because I researched it in the annual report. For
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I found
Okay.
it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to try and make these opportunities happen for yourself, right?
course.
Absolutely.
So Jeff invited me to his chambers for a cup of tea, and
Okay.
just had a chat about it. And I asked him if I could just observe. Just wanted to observe, and then I ended up working out in Warrnambool, which for people who don't know, it's probably about 4 hours outside of Melbourne. And I was briefed for about 3 months straight in the winter, like during the football season. So I wasn't around on the Tuesday nights when they run the tribunals.
Yeah.
And I think it was the last week, maybe leading into the preliminary finals, that it was awesome. It was a Toby Green matter.
Way.
Yeah. Of course it had to do with Toby Green.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I emailed Jeff and I was like, hey, I'm in town. Can I watch you in the tribunal tonight? And he emailed me back and said, sorry, I'm in New York running an arbitration, as you do when you have a practice like Jeff's.
Right.
But Nick Payne, who's another brilliant advocate, senior counsel, was running the matter. And I emailed Nick and he said, yep, come along. And I did. And it was just... at the time, they were having them still in person, so it was like down in the bowels of Marvel Stadium.
Yeah.
Really, it's an interesting place. I'm sure, like people, reporters and things. I think that's where they do the press conferences, right after the games. Yeah, and just to be in the room with all the players, it was like kind of unreal. Yeah.
Especially if you're a big fan, that's a bit like. Oh,
Well, I mean,
yeah.
you can say what you want about Toby Green. He's an incredible footballer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great
Absolutely.
footballer. He only leads the league in most suspensions or something like that. But his talent is unmatched.
Great footballer and good for your career.
Yeah. So then this is the other takeaway from it, because after I took some notes, was taking some notes, and after the next morning, actually, saw that the Giants were going to appeal. So I quickly typed up my notes, sent them to Nick, and said, here, hope these help. If you need any other assistance, let me know. And I got to help write the submissions for the appeal.
Incredible.
So it was really good.
So you just made it happen. That's
I kind of like got my foot in the door and then like broke the door down after that. Maybe.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Also, one of my biggest takeaways from that is I need to start drinking tea.
That's the
That's how you get invited.
Yeah, tea in the chambers. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna start drinking tea for
Wow, that is an incredible story.
Yeah. So then it's just kind of gone from there. I've done a football anti-doping matter. I've been involved in some public law and a concussion inquest.
Yeah.
And then I've done tribunal work for other clubs. So that's really interesting. So flipping from effectively the prosecutorial role to the defense role.
Yeah.
So I've done that for a number of clubs, not only football, but for other sports as well. But that's a completely different jurisdiction, the National Sports Tribunal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got questions about all of that. Speaking of anti-doping, we actually understand you originally studied chemistry and molecular biology before pursuing law. Has that influenced your career in sports law? Has it helped you in anti-doping matters or otherwise?
So yes, I think the analytical skills that you learn with a science background, so chemistry, molecular biology, whatever kind of sports or engineering kind of background you might come from, I think translate readily into legal analysis. So but as a scientist, you're kind of like, well, I'm going to take point, A plus B and get C.
Yeah.
In law, you know the result you want, right? So in the A plus B equals C example, you know the C.
Yeah.
You've got A, which might be the facts that you've got, and then plus B, which is the law, and it's how you put A and B together to get C, to try and get the result for your client.
Yeah.
So I think it's very transferable. In terms of specifically anti-doping, yes, because really a lot about the substances on the WADA prohibited list.
You
might know like kind of what they do, what they are, how they metabolize in the body. So you can actually come up with maybe some more informed questions that somebody who doesn't have that background can.
Yeah.
It helps as well in prosecuting drug trafficking.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. I was going to say, definitely when you pursue other stuff like that. Oh, 100%. I think law is just like so well informed by a ton of diverse backgrounds. I mean, so
for sure.
Chemistry and molecular biology, a lot of people think that wouldn't link in any way, but you've made the transition seamless, I think. So
yeah. And I think I used to do a lot of injury work, so that background as well really translated into that. Really gave a strong background.
Yeah.
It's really cool how those flow together, because I wouldn't think they would have much of a match, but the more you think of it, the more they do really flow into each other. It's pretty cool.
Both careers very, very analytical.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
I would want to touch on, before we get into some more deeper stuff, you were selected for the Change Our Game Women in Governments program.
Yeah.
So what did that experience sort of teach you about the structural changes needed to improve gender representation in sports leadership? So how did that sort of pan out?
Yeah, so at that time, I was on the board of the Southern Football Netball League. So it's one of the big metro leagues in Melbourne. And I think at least when I started, I was the only female. And it was really intimidating because I didn't have that, born and bred kind of background in football or netball. And I was just passionate and crazy about sports and participation, and thought I could give it a crack. And I was very lucky to have, or fortunate maybe is the better term, to have the support of the chair of the board, Mark Gauchi, as well as some support from AFL Victoria to when I applied for that program, because it was a competitive application process. Yeah. And the government now has some targets for sport boards for the sporting. I think it's around 40% are meant to be women, and they're linking that in some way to the funding that those grassroots organizations can receive from the state. And I think that will go some way to getting women and more women involved in leadership, because it is a real black hole still. I think there are programs like Change Our Game, which is really helping with getting women onto boards as well as into media roles. And you've seen definitely more women in sports media. And I think that's amazing, because now women and girls who are coming up, like the children of today can actually see, oh yeah, that's like a possibility that I can be a commentator at some point.
Awesome.
Right? Because it's possible that I can actually be a CEO of a major sporting organization. Like I can aspire to that rather than not have that visual representation. So Change Our Game was an amazing program. So I learned so much about sports governance. It's informed the practice of law and how I approach things, especially from governance standpoints. And it was just a really amazing experience.
Now that's incredible. Yeah, we're hoping that even with our podcast a little bit, we can shine some light on some women in sports and sports 100%. Law and all that as well, because it's just super important. So one of the principals here at our firm, Paula Applehans, you're familiar with?
Yes, I know Paula.
Yeah, she's quite involved with sports as well. She's done, and she's, I think her and her husband, along with the firm, we made a small donation to the U16 Tongan rugby team so they could go over to Fiji and play.
Oh, fantastic.
Stuff like that where people get involved, and then there's future leadership and things like that. There's an all-girls team with a women's coach and things like that. It just allows us to highlight those faces and names and give young girls something to look forward to.
Absolutely. It's about creating the opportunity, isn't it? Yeah. So like with Change Our Game, it creates the opportunity for women to get that foot in the door, that critical foot in the door, and to get those skills so they can't, I think I'll just back up. When women apply for, I know this is going to sound like a general stereotype, right? But if I'm looking at a job description or a role description and I don't meet some of those criteria, I'm like, oh, maybe I won't apply, right? Yeah. But now with programs like this, you just tick those boxes and go for it.
So good.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really awesome.
Just quickly on that, because I'd love to know, because I've got a little sister who I'm so passionate in, like her stepping into multiple fields and like seeing the growth in like women's sport, not just like the athlete side of it, but also just like the general, like you said, the media and all the. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot more of a female push, which is good and it's needed. Because do you have a personal experience at all, or did you sort of find any hardship as a female sort of fighting into these spots that were so difficult or were hard, or, a lot of people were applying for the gig itself?
Look, I've had some negative experiences, but there have been less than the positive ones, if I can say. Yeah, and I've tried to, just trying to reconcile those things as, it's probably it says more about the people who, if I can say, transgressed what might be social norms that we aspire to, if I can be diplomatic about that. Yeah. And people being kind of unaware because the culture has been so male dominated for so long. Like,
That's phenomenal. So, it sounds like at least this sphere is changing a little bit in the right direction. So,
I agree. I agree. And like even in the at the AF, I use AFL tribunal because it really should be held out as an example of a successful way that matters are held. I have a lot of respect for the people at the AFL who are running that tribunal. They've started to use more female advocates, and they have a co-chair who is a female as well. So, yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I think part of this leads to our next question a little bit. You're also part of the editorial panel for LexisNexis Sports Law. So my question really about that is about legal commentary and its effects on the field of law, sports law specifically. But I think in terms of what we were just talking about with gender, legal commentary is such that you can provide, can affect change. So I just kind of wanted to know, how do you see the role of legal commentary such as at LexisNexis impacting sports law, gender, race, whatever there is?
Yeah, I think a lot of the articles that we put out in the Sports Law Bulletin are thought leadership pieces. We've done a lot. We do some thematic issues. So we've done like Paralympics and Olympics in the last Olympic year. We've just or are about to have an edition that's all about the enhanced games, which I wrote a piece about after when I started doing that research. I was a bit troubled because I wasn't sure I wanted to give the enhanced games a lot of publicity just because of personal beliefs. Of course. But it's happening. And it's recently been in the media, impacting at least one Australian swimmer.
Yep.
So I think, do we have an obligation maybe to comment on these things and to put ideas out there and to get people to actually think about, can you or could a mainstream athlete, because the whole thing I think with the enhanced games is that they're actually getting paid. The athletes are getting paid more than, clean athletes. Standard competition maybe is the better phrase for it. So how does that, could somebody circumvent the water regulations, compete in an enhanced games, potentially win a prize, and then go back to their standard competition?
Right.
So that's actually a topic that I wrote about.
Yeah.
So that'll be coming soon.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's interesting because like James Magnussen's the swimmer that you're referring to, and he was amazing in the Olympics. Like it was great,
incredible.
Medals.
Yeah.
Right?
Like honestly, the top of the game. Like because Australia is very strong in the water, and he was one of our best swimmers. And then all of a sudden, I saw him like 4 times the size of what he was one day, and I was like, "Whoa,
crazy, crazy!"
He's got wings on his back.
I think you're right too. Just to touch on quickly a point that you made about the obligation. I think that there is an obligation for minds in these spheres to speak about this stuff and provoke people to think, but think deeply about these topics, these ideas, and challenge them if they feel it's necessary, especially in sports. It's a field that's dominated by media presence and can actually be impacted by commentary directly, right? You can influence sports bodies, organizations, and things like that through media, through legal commentary, whatever it may be, right? So I think that obligation just it exists so much in this sphere, sports law, all of it. So.
We can probably come back and talk about that in a couple of months, I think. I've got something coming down the pike, so.
Okay, awesome. Done. Yeah. Hold your horses for that space. Audience. Yeah, watch this space.
Watch this space. That's
we'll be there.
So while we're on the topic of media, social media has obviously received a massive increase in, how much eyes, and not just on, social media platforms, but on athletes and, organizations and sports itself. And especially there's been a pretty steady rise in race and gender field abuse through social media, and it's played such a big role in that sort of atmosphere, you could say. So how are sports organizations, policies and codes developed to combat that sort of activity, you could say?
Yeah, this was a really hard one because it just seems to keep happening. I think there's very little that can be done about the public. I think sports organizations are doing a better job at supporting the athletes who are the targets and providing well-being services. So a lot of clubs now, at least at the AFL levels, how I am aware of them, have well-being officers, and they help players through those times. I think as well that clubs are also more ready to sanction members or non-athletes.
Yeah, okay.
We've seen that a couple of times. I think most recently with, was it Alir playing in Sydney?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. It's just, there's no place for that in sport. And I think having that kind of zero tolerance policy will send a really big, sends a big message.
Absolutely. I think zero tolerance is like the only direction you can go with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the access the public has to athletes now it's never seen before. I mean, it's beyond just the influence of social media. I mean, you can directly access athletes now, like you never would have been able to.
Yeah, so, you can just I could just get on my phone and DM.
Exactly.
Right? DM
exactly.
somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Another issue in sports that's growing not just domestically but internationally is the science on concussions. Its long-term impacts on athletes. It's ever developing. I think it's going to continue to develop. I don't know if science or legal professionals will ever have a perfect answer for those topics. But at all levels of sport, it needs to be balanced. The science and the practical aspect of sports where participation in the sport itself creates risk of concussion, right?
Yep.
You can't end the sport entirely because participation in footy or in American football, for example, I mean, it inherently incorporates a risk of concussion, right?
Oh, gridiron. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Like,
so
I think about rugby scrums as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
My brother played rugby in university. That was where I was first exposed to rugby.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, ooh, like...
It's brutal. Yeah. It's brutal. I mean, these headshots these players are taking, but you can never take it out of the game entirely. Sure, there are safety regulations and things like that, but how do you see organizations at all levels of sport developing codes, policies, things like that to combat this, to balance that inherent risk with protection?
Yeah. So it was probably about a year, maybe almost 2 ago, they had a Senate inquiry into concussion. Yeah. I think that at least in Australia, because of how sports are structured with the national sporting organizations and then the kind of rule, right, the sport, each of their siloed sports, I think the government's going to have to set standards. So I think you'll see more coming out of the Australian Sports Commission about minimum standards for the sports to not aspire to, they'd have to comply with. And I think that's where it's going to have to come from, because otherwise you'll see a really disjointed approach. I'm just thinking about one injury I had when I was playing tennis. I had a terrible mishit. The ball came off the frame of my racket and hit me in the eye.
Oh.
Right. So I broke some blood vessels in my eye. It was a little bit ugly. But, I mean, even tennis, like I don't know that any sport is kind of immune. Well, I don't know. Maybe table tennis is something you're really unlikely to get a concussion.
Maybe, but who knows?
I just think the breadth of sports impacted. And it's not only your footballs, your rugby, soccer with, the ball coming off your head, how children are trained to soccer. Like, I think that's probably, if you're a kid playing soccer, the funnest thing about soccer is being able to head the ball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But maybe that's not the best, best way to train. Equestrian, like falling off a horse, is the risk of concussion there is evident. It's just such a broad, impact that I think it's going to have to come from the top down.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of like how they can affect change with regards to concussion protection or just player safety generally, do you think there's something in collective bargaining agreements or contracts that can be placed in these things that can make a real difference?
Yeah, I think probably for sports where concussion is key, so your footy, your rugby, soccer, those types of sports, there's definitely scope scope for that.
Yeah.
Whether the governing bodies are,
Right.
that's just where the tension lies. But I think generally sports they're trying to do the right thing by players. You can also see some pushback from players. For example, I think it was Jack Rewalt said, this was years ago, that if he had to miss playing because of the concussion protocols, he would, he'd do whatever he needed to do to try to play in a grand final, right? So, and this is where you might see the crossover of employment law because whether these mandatory sit-out periods are a restraint of trade. So there's definitely some topics that are ripe for collective bargaining, and they're actually ripe for litigation. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. I think a real challenge too with those governing bodies making proper codes of conduct, safety regulations, things like that, is that it doesn't just affect the athletes. I mean, you have to govern the physical trainers within the team, the doctors within the team. I mean, these are inevitably the people who will clear the players to go back in the game.
Absolutely.
You've seen increase in gridiron in the NFL where players get cleared, then get reconcussed. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa comes to mind. He's a quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, but he's repeated concussions. I mean, the public outrage too that comes with that goes back to social media's effect on and legal commentary's effect on sports. But it's just so difficult to hit every aspect of every sports organization and govern them appropriately.
Yeah, and there's also impact on individual clubs and teams as well. If those certain players aren't playing, supporters aren't happy, sponsors aren't happy. It's a real balance to strike, and it's not easy.
No, not at all. Not at all. Look, I don't think that I can hold him off any longer.
I'm excited for this one.
So
this is good.
We have to talk about it.
Okay.
Patty Cripps.
Oh my God, this is like, can I just say it is probably the highlight of my career, and I feel like I peaked too early.
I guess how do you come back down from that into something else, right?
You couldn't. For reference, Patrick Cripps is my air freshener in my car.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm
I bleed blue.
Stop it.
Oh,
yes.
there we go.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
I genuinely love this human. So just for context, for everyone out there, Patrick Cripps back in 2022 basically hit someone. They're both going for the ball and hit a opponent from Brisbane called Calamachi. And
he's also an amazing player.
He's fantastic. Incredible. It's such a utility. Can play all positions.
So good.
Yeah, he's great. I would love him in Carlton. And unfortunately, Callum got concussed from the incident.
Yeah.
Which in this day and age, would give you 3 weeks of a suspension. And
if you're lucky.
Exactly right. And I cried tears of joy the day that my favorite human on earth got let off and had nothing and ended up winning the Brownlow, which I have a signed poster in my room hung up in a frame. And I had no clue who to thank. And I finally met you. Just fantastic. So thank you so much. But could you tell me, what was probably your biggest takeaway from that whole case? Because it's not just the magnitude of Patrick Cripps within the AFL and the face that he is, because AFL media-wise, they go to him for sponsorship and branding and all that. But also you have probably the second biggest club in the nation with over 100,000 members all screaming that he gets off. But then you have everyone else saying, why is he, even a part of this? He should be suspended. There's all this media scrutiny that you face as well as the whole AFL. How was that whole experience trying to balance that?
Yeah.
Wow. This was really probably one of the most exciting cases that I've worked on, probably because, like I said before, these things are really timely. So they lost, the Carlton appeal team lost at the first instance, so we lost at tribunal, and that's when I got involved. So we sat down, kind of nutted out what points we wanted to appeal, and then I wrote the appeal. I don't think I slept for like 2 days
Yeah, I can imagine.
getting it done.
Neither did I, but I wasn't obviously on that side. I was just
Yeah, I could have had you doing my citation.
yeah, I would have loved that. Trust me.
And then got the appeal ticked off, got it filed, and then I appeared as junior to Chris Townsend, Casey, who's another amazing silk and mentor for me at the bar. Gosh, I've been really lucky to have
Yes, yeah.
access to and work with these people. Chris is an amazing human being as well. And we got into the appeal. Chris made all his points. It only took 4 hours.
Yeah, we were actually going to ask you about that. We know it's a 4.5-hour hearing, and the appeals board eventually overturned the suspension.
That's right.
Of course. Thank you so much for that.
That's okay.
What was that like? It must have been physically, mentally exhausting. Like
I was exhausted at the night because I think there was another matter before us that we didn't finish until
That's correct.
it was after midnight.
Yeah.
So I was exhausted, having not slept as well for the previous 2 nights getting this appeal done. And and as you're listening to as you're a barrister, listening to the decision coming down from the fact finder, whether it's a tribunal or a judge or whatever, you're trying to figure out, well, are we going to win? Are we going to win? Like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And then I just remember the point where I was like, oh my God, we're going to get up.
Yeah.
And it was just like the best feeling in the world. And, we had a bunch of people from the club were there, and we had a little celebration after that.
that must have been incredible.
That'd been amazing.
Yeah.
I want to be a fly on a wall. So good.
And then I had a good sleep in.
A well-deserved sleep in.
How do you handle the pressure on a case like that, where the case is playing out just as much in the media as it is in the tribunal room?
Oh, they're live stream. Like some commentators are live streaming it, like literally comments every 5-10 minutes. So obviously, like during the hearing, I'm not checking streaming social media, but in the lead up, I just didn't have time actually to like be on and looking at things. After the fact, I saw a few memes that were put out about Patrick Cripps' legal team, and it was, I think, like a group from like Entourage or something, right?
Amazing.
And I'm like, wait, there's a few more women in there, but
No Vinny Chase in that room.
So, it's just, I think as an advocate, I try to avoid that. And just keep, it's like eyes on the prize. I know what I need to do. I know what my appeal points are. And we had some really good ones that I thought would, or might at least, have a chance. And in the end,
They sure did.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. No, that was amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good.
When you reflect on that case, what reforms or have you seen or do you think could be implemented to suggest and enhance the fairness and clarity of the AFL's disciplinary process? Because that's ultimately what the case turned on, right?
Yeah.
In the end was, lack of procedural fairness, basically, right?
So, exactly. I think it's just, I think that tribunal is set up properly, and I just think sometimes it's just some things that are overlooked that. Especially like in Patrick's case, that it just maybe just to be a bit more safeguarded. I know that there's been some changes in the tribunal since then, and I think there's actually some time limits as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. I think so. Yeah. Like, why weren't those in place back then?
Yeah, and I think the real issue is how things are kind of graded. Based on, sometimes it seems like they go backwards, right? If there's a concussion, then there has to be something wrong. We've seen, but I really think for standards of behavior or play, or that standard just needs to be set, and if that standard's met, even if there's a concussion, it might just be an unfortunate result rather than careless
Yeah.
careless behavior of the player.
Right. Or even intentionality. I mean, how do you determine something like that of a bump, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think before the podcast, we were discussing a little bit of the relevance of criminal law and the foundations there to like sports law.
Yeah.
Do you see that kind of play out in this? Like, how do you make out the elements of what's caused concussion,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, the concept of intentionality versus careless are, there's obvious examples of like off the ball incidents.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to consider that might be careless if someone, just takes a wind up and punches somebody off the ball.
of course.
But on the ball, intentionality, I think, is really difficult, or would be really difficult to get up on.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. We were super excited to talk about Patty Cripps.
I've been holding that in ever since
I
you walked
just
through the door.
Yeah.
That's my Brownlow.
Is it? Okay,
yes,
that's your
Jay,
Brownlow. Okay.
Oh, heck yeah. it
I
is.
say you share a little bit in his
That's
Brownlow
sure.
or a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I might need you to also sign my poster. Just say
honestly, just
everyone's
as
part of
good.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Well, apparently you had a couple busy years throughout that period because you also have HV tennis that happened throughout that period of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once again, just for reference, in 2021, during a boys under 14s tennis match in suburban Melbourne, an incident occurred where two spectators, Mr. H and Mr. K, who were the fathers of the competing players, ended up being a bit abusive and started going a little bit off track from a bit of fatherhood and parenting, more into sort of wild spectators. Is that
It was wild.
Yeah.
It got really, I think, out of hand.
Yeah.
And
know-
certainly more than what Tennis Australia would expect of parents. In that case, I think really reflects, I think there were cultural aspects involved as well that perhaps weren't fully understood. Investigating integrity matters like this I think, is very difficult, and I think need to be quite nuanced.
What were what were the cultural sort of aspects of the case, if you don't mind sharing that?
I think
And just before we dive into it, I think so people know, Mr. H was suspended and for 2 years from
That's right.
attendance, and he appealed the severity of the sanction
we did.
to the National Sports Tribunal,
Yep.
which you played a pivotal role as counsel on Mr. H's behalf before the NST, and you challenged the severity of those sanctions imposed, right?
That's
So,
right.
yeah, you just
Ultimately, we didn't get up,
Yeah.
right? But I think that case is about having the right to challenge that sanction, having the right to be legally represented and have assistance. And I think the key takeaway for me in that instance is that if you are in trouble, because it was definitely trouble that happened that day, to seek legal advice straight away.
Yeah.
And I know that's a little bit self-serving from a table of lawyers, but I think that could have impacted perhaps not the outcome, but how the outcome came about and the process. And because I think for participants like Mr. H, it's the process and being at least feeling as though you've been treated fairly. And I think that's where the difficulty lies.
Right. I think there was a fairly complex procedural history in this case.
Definitely.
And, there was questions about admitting new evidence, scope of rehearing, jurisdiction, all of this. With relation to all that, but what's it like to work on a case, and how do you navigate those kinds of procedural hurdles in something that's so emotionally charged, especially where there are cultural impacts and things that you maybe expand on?
No, so it's actually getting better because sporting codes are starting to get a bit more uniform. There's a national integrity framework now that's put out, I think, by Sport Integrity Australia. So many of the national sporting bodies have very similar structure and have very, so when a matter is investigated, like what the options are, and then the referrals to the National Sports Tribunal, and then it's generally a hearing de novo of the matter that was investigated. So that will generally allow fresh evidence because you have a rehearing of the matter that was determined by the sporting body. So that's getting better, I think, and it's getting a little bit easier to navigate. But you also have to check because not every sport has just adopted the National Integrity Framework or the policies beneath the National Integrity Framework wholesale. So you still need to check. There's lots of nuances or differences or little things like, can you have fresh evidence, or are you limited to what was heard, by the sporting body or determined by the sporting body, the information that they had. So, I think. No, I can't remember what your original question was, and I hope I've answered it.
No, that was very good. You answered it. It's
I'm the barrister. I'm meant to be asking the questions, right? Not answering.
It's just about navigating those procedural hurdles, and we know it was an
Exactly.
emotionally charged case, so we were just.
It was very emotionally charged, and reported as well. So
yeah. No, that's incredible. Thank you. I think we kind of wanted to ask you some questions about one last case that you worked on that we were super interested in.
Okay.
I think it sort of flows in pretty well from the emotionally charged aspect of it, considering it did involve juniors, the appellants versus Gymnastics Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So that case itself. So once again, a quick little summary is this case involved a group of junior elite gymnasts appealing their non-selection for the 2023 Artistic Gymnastics National Squad.
I actually didn't know that was a sport until I got this case.
Really?
In terms of gymnastics?
Artistic, like the...
Artistic gymnastics.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The gymnastics has so many little niche things. Like they jump
It's
around.
amazing. Like Google it.
Oh, it's incredible.
They're fantastic.
It is incredible.
They're fantastic,
Yeah.
I love watching the ones where they just have the ribbon. I'm like, you know what?
No, they're like
I can crack
flipping
that.
there's two like base girls, and they flip the other girl around.
Yeah.
Like
it's pretty full on.
It is incredible.
Unreal
Gymnasts
strength.
are in
the athleticism.
They're athletes. Yeah, they're athletes
I just
for sure.
can't. Yeah.
absolutely.
But you also had to deal with the NST in this one when they dismissed the appeal because I don't think they just didn't see enough support to appeal that.
Yeah.
But probably the main question we want to ask you in this case is, obviously with junior athletes, it could be quite emotional.
It was.
As I would imagine. So how did you balance the legal strategy along with your clients' like emotional side of things?
And their expectations for an outcome, right?
That's right,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just. So if you're acting for one junior athlete, you have to like one or two parents, perhaps more. And since we had a group of 3 athletes, we were dealing and managing expectations of a lot more. I had a great instructor for that case as well, who was very good and did that kind of buffering for me, so I could just try and focus on the legal issues. I appeared unled at the first instance hearing, but we got a more senior counsel, Adrian Anderson, who helped with the appeal. And he's another amazing sports barrister who has incredible. He actually set up the AFL tribunal system. He used to work for the AFL as well. And Adrian and I put together the submissions, which ultimately didn't get up. But again, we had the athletes had their day. They were heard. And while we ultimately didn't get up, I think my key takeaway is that regardless of whether you're a junior athlete or a senior athlete, like this matters. Selection matters. And they were a brilliant trio. So and just that seriousness or that impact this is again going back to the impact on individual people.
Yeah.
Like that will impact those girls for a long time, I'm sure, that non-selection. So
Absolutely.
I hope they actually have come out stronger now.
Yeah.
And more dedicated to their sport. They're just incredible.
Yeah. I think that this case just highlights the unique nature of sports law so much in terms that in every area of law, you're managing client expectations, of course. But when it comes to athletics and sports, I mean, people, this is their life, typically.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
tied to this in all aspects. And you need to manage that. Exactly.
Right?
It is
it's your identity.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sometimes I feel like that as a barrister as well. Like, what would I do if I wasn't a barrister?
Right, exactly. And you hold that in your hands occasionally, right? And it's got to be so hard to balance those expectations, that pressure as well. But you just do your duty to your client, I imagine, right?
Exactly.
And do the best work that you can.
Exactly.
I think, so the tribunal ultimately in that case upheld the decision of Gymnastics Australia,
That's
despite acknowledging process flaws in their summary.
Yeah, that was frustrating.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the event that they were meant to participate in was meant to be held in Israel, which around that time was never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I actually should look up what did happen. I'd be interested to find out what did happen. And there was encouragement. I think this is in the decision, which is on the website, but encouragement to host another event.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I think we're running out here, but we
this
do.
was so fun. That's went by really quickly.
Oh, we're having a great time. We have one final question for you.
Yeah.
For aspiring sports law lawyers out there, what is one piece of advice, or multiple, we're happy to sit here and listen to a dozen, that you could give them for maybe cracking into the area of sports law or attacking it on the best foot possible?
Be brave and don't be afraid to put yourself out there as wanting to do that kind of work, even if you haven't done that kind of work. Observe. So you understand and can see what is going on and what the process is, and you know what's going on. There's lots of, I think, generous people in the community who would allow you to come tag along, and it's a way to get experience without actually you're not the one doing something for the first time and making the mistakes, so you can actually see how things go.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would advise.
Awesome. That's great to know, honestly. Okay, I lied. One more question.
Okay.
Because we were super interested in this topic, but
Okay.
are there unique challenges when dealing with international regulatory bodies, governing bodies like FIFA, CAS, the IOC, et cetera, or domestic bodies, things like that? Is there something unique you can point to that makes them different than being in a courtroom elsewhere?
So I think procedure, you have to be really, really on top of the procedure for things that are outside of what we would find the norm. And you might not, or you might find that things are different than how we see it. So, I mean, even just from practicing law in the US to practicing here, things are very similar but might have a different name. Yeah. So you've just got to be really, really on top of your procedure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I think that's fantastic advice for everybody out there aspiring to get into sports law or already in sports law. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us today. It's been super educational. It's been a great chat. Love to learn more about you and your legal history, so it's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was really fun.
Absolutely. I think you might be back as a guest some other time, so stay tuned, everybody. Hopefully, if we can get you back on through your busy schedule.
Would love to.
You remember her, watch this space. Something happening in a couple months. You never know. Watch the space.
That's it. Well, thank you guys so much. Sign us out of here, Nate.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Full Court Press family, for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next pod. Take care.